Joining us live is Virginia's Democratic Governor Tim Kaine, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Governor, thanks for joining us. We'd rather hear from you than Robert Gibbs, so that's why we didn't play that. But let me talk to you about this.
Great to be with you, Tamara.
Great to have you. What do you think? How do you see this referendum bellwether? Does it matter? Is it overstated? How do you see these two, especially the gubernatorial races, affecting how the White House is seen?
Well, let me talk about the gubernatorial races and then New York 23. I mean, traditionally, these races right after the presidential year are very focused on local issues and haven't been much of a bellwether for the midterms. In 2001, for example, Democrats won both governor's races while President Bush was at his most popular. But then the next year in the midterms, President Bush did quite well. And in fact, for 24 years, Tamron, the party that wins the White House loses both of these governorships in Virginia and New Jersey. It's been 32 years in Virginia since a governor has won of the same party that just won the White House. So with the way we look at it at the DNC is that, you know, these are uphill races in both of our cases. We had underdog candidates. They were writing us off in midsummer, but we fought back strong, and we're working awful hard to break that 24-year string. And you know, we feel like we got a good shot tomorrow.
But let me ask you specifically about the race in Virginia, because you've got a candidate, McDonald, who many thought would have been on the fences after this thesis came out with some offensive language some saw regarding women, and the independent voters there, them taking a stand, and at least in the polling showing that they're even willing to go with McDonald even though he's got this controversial past. What's happening with the Democrats there?
Well, it's interesting. The president's very popular in Virginia. His approval rating in the best poll, which is the Washington Post poll, 2,000 sample size live interviews, the president's popularity in Virginia is 57% among registered voters, and the Virginia voters approve of Mark Warner, Jim Webb, and me. So there is a strong approval for Democratic voters, but what we've got to do is we've just got to close that gap. We have to energize President Obama's supporters. He's been here in Virginia twice for Creed deeds, and that's what we're working to do. And similarly, that's the same thing that's happening in New Jersey. You know, the Republican Party was basically writing off both of the Democratic candidates and kind of bragging early that they were going to win both in the summer. But both have turned into real fights, and we're working real hard to be successful. We think the story may well be the special congressional race, New York 23. I never thought I would applaud Republican fundraising prowess, but get this, Tamron and David, you have a Republican Party that has put nearly $1 million into their nominee's race, Dede Skozafava, and she has now endorsed the Democratic candidate. I want to thank them for being good fundraisers. It's great having a state legislator endorsing our candidate in a tough seat, but it portends a deep divide in the Republican Party that we're seeing also in Texas and Florida and a number of states in 2010. I think that's going to be the continuing story after tomorrow night.
But Governor Kaine, maybe you don't want to thank Dede Skozafava too early. I mean, when she was still in the race, the Democrat Bill Owens was leading because Skozafava and Doug Hoffman were splitting the Republican vote. Since she has dropped out and endorsed the Democrat, the polls now show that Hoffman is winning.
Well, obviously, David, this is a tough district. No Democrat has held it in more than 100 years. But again, just the specter of what's happening here, the Republican Party's nominee, the person that Michael Steele and the party got behind and put nearly $1 million into a race, gets run out of the race. I think what's happening in the Republican Party is you're seeing no moderates need apply. The moderates, the centrists, that core part of what used to be the Republican Party is basically getting forced out by extreme candidates, and I think you're going to see that as a continuing battle within that party that will go forward no matter how the New York 23 race finishes up tomorrow night.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. Governor Tim Kaine, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be back.
Thank you. Well, David, on Election Day, we're going to have full team coverage of all the critical races across the country. Myself and David